Hello and welcome to Channels Book Club. I'm Olakunle Kasumo. It's great to be back on the show once again. Today we are going to the world of poetry. We've got a great poet on the show today. He's one of those young men who inspires us, who remind us that Nigeria can have a great future if we get our acts together. It's a very talented poet and a linguist, if you may want to describe him as such. Let's get to meet Kola Olatunbosun, and after the introduction, enjoy this chat we had with him. Kola, nice to have you on Channels Book Club.
I'm glad to be here.
Great to have you here, at last.
Yes, finally, we made it.
Long time. Welcome. You have an interesting career. Linguist, poet, writer, journalist.
Yes.
And it just goes on and on.
Yes.
So tell me a bit about that. I will like viewers to know a bit of your story. What inspired you to become a linguist? What has that been like for you?
So I studied linguistics in university, which is a crazy story too, because linguistics was not my first choice, it was my second choice. And at the time, I don't know if it's the same with you, nobody knew what linguistics was about. You just thought that it would help you learn many languages. But communication arts seemed to be an interesting thing at the time. Somebody I knew then, Professor Larinde Akinleye, who you might know in some of the Finodu Kilani movies, was a professor in the UI at the time, and he was in the Department of Communication Arts. So I always thought that maybe I'll do communication arts, I'll become like a TV person and stuff like that. I don't know why I applied for it, but it was my first choice. Apparently many people did too, so I wasn't given the first choice, I was given linguistics. So I was like, okay, I don't know what it's like, but I'm going to find out. But so after the first semester of being in linguistics, I actually fell in love with it. Many things I had thought about as a child, issues of language. My father was a Yoruba writer and broadcaster. And I was growing up in a private school where English was spoken and they penalized you for speaking Yoruba. So many of those conflicts of language had been within me for so long, and I wasn't able to express them until I was in linguistics. So I finally figured out, okay, this is something I could actually enjoy and learn from. So that's how my linguistics career went.
So it's not about many languages?
No, it's not. It's just a science of language. That's what linguistics is.
Science of
language. Actually, many people are surprised that it's a science. It's in the Faculty of Arts, but most of the things we do are science. They teach you all the things in the vocal tract. You learn all how the lung works. Just everything that has to do with language.
So when you look at the world, when you look at people, you look at them through the eyes of languages.
Yes. Yes.
If I may put it that way.
Yes. I am very curious about language. There are things I notice that many people don't in languages. Why does this person speak this way? What kind of accents is this person have? There was a time when my wife and I were in Chicago, and we had a taxi driver who spoke brilliant American English. But every once in a while, there's a word that kept coming up, and I said to my wife, who was in the back, like, this person sounds like he might have been a Nigerian or he might have lived in Nigeria. And she said, how did I know? I said, there's a particular sound, I think it was can or something like that he pronounced in a certain way that, it was just curious to me. And she said, well, let's test it out. So when we finished, we asked him, and he said, yeah, he was Nigerian. But he's lived in the U.S. for like 20 years. So his accent had almost totally gone, but there are some remnants that remain there. So there are things like that I can catch as a linguist that ordinary people probably overlook and assume.
But, okay, but then it also has to do with speaking various languages. Does that have anything to do with?
Well, so most linguists are able to speak many languages because they're curious about language, and it gives them, they already have the tools to understand how language works. So when you speak one or two languages, you're able to acquire a third or a fourth because you can easily predict how this language will behave by just interacting with it. So it turns out that many linguists might be able to speak different languages, but it's not the purpose of their work. It's like a mechanic. You can ask a mechanic, how many cars do you have? He may not have any car. He may have 10 cars if he wants to, but his work is actually dealing with how the car works itself. Okay. We're dealing with the tools and knowing, understanding how cars work. It doesn't mean that he can create a car. He might, but... You know.
But you've done a lot of work with the Yoruba language.
With languages, not just Yoruba.
With languages generally.
Yes.
So it's wrong to say specifically Yoruba language.
So I am competent in Yoruba, I admit that, and this comes again from my upbringing. And when I was in linguistics, I realized that there are many things I've acquired in Yoruba that many people don't know, so I have done a lot of work to enhance and to encourage that direction. But as a linguist, I've also worked on Nigerian English. For instance, the Google voice you would hear on your phone, on your map, we worked on that at Google, and that's a linguistics project. I've worked on Pidgin, I've worked on, different languages, some I don't even speak. So it is not always Yoruba, but because I speak Yoruba as a first language, it's easy for me for it to be the primary source of my work, especially because I'm able to, with technology, create something like yorubaname.com, which I did, a dictionary of Yoruba names. Because I am competent in language, I have acquired a number of words, and I think that I can pass on that knowledge to a number of other people. So, but my core work is linguistics. Yoruba happens to be a language I'm competent in and I'm able to use to benefit others who speak the language or who want to learn it.
Well, I think you'll become a prof very soon.
So, might happen.
So that is why. So linguistics.
Yes.
That is what you express something here in, and we'll come to this book. But let me quickly jump to something in one of your poems, where you said, "Campus Dare." Page 4. No one will believe that the African had not seen them alive, this close, ever, until language brought him there.
Yes.
That took you all over the world, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. Actually, this book came out as a result of a trip I made to the US in 2009 to teach Yoruba, to go to your point. So this time was between my undergrad and master's. I had finished undergraduate. I had nothing else to do. I mean, I was writing for magazines and stuff like that, but I hadn't decided on where I wanted to do my master's. People said I should do it in UI. I was trying, but for some reason, I wanted to get out of the environment, but I didn't have any means to. So I saw this opportunity to go teach Yoruba in the US as a Fulbright scholar. So I applied for it, and they picked me. So the Fulbright program is sort of like an exchange program where US finds scholars and teachers in a country. That they do it for many countries around the world. And you take your language, they find out that whether you're competent in your own language, and then they take you to an American university where you teach that language in a classroom for 2 semesters. So in the university, I went to Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, which is where the name comes from. There were 2 of us. I taught Yoruba. My friend Reham taught Arabic. And every year, there were always new languages. Because sometimes the next year, they would bring someone to teach French, someone to teach Somali or something like that. So language was what took me from Nigeria to the US for the first time.
US. Yes. Wow. And Edwardsville by heart, this book is like a memoir. It's a book of poetry, a travelogue, but also a memoir of your stay at Edwardsville, right?
Yeah.
That's what inspired it.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about this. You started by talking about your mentor, Papa Rudy.
Yes.
What's the story behind this book?
So Papa Rudy, I mentioned him a lot in the preface. He was a man that I'd met for the first time actually in 2002 when I was in University in Ibadan. He had, along with Professor Emiraji, Ron Schaefer, Professor Igbohare, they had this co-op. They called it like a research exchange. They were all professors. So Papa Rudy and some other folks from Edwardsville had joined this cooperative, and they were to come to Nigeria to do some research. Then the Nigerian professors would go with them to the US as well. So part of their work in Ibadan involved coming to classes, meeting with people. And then I think at the time, Professor Ibuari also became a professor at the time. So we had a gathering for him and took pictures and stuff. So I'd met him then without, I mean, I remembered him, but I didn't, there was no personal contact or anything. I spent more time with Professor Redmond, Eugene Redmond, who was also part of them, who was a poet. So in 2009, when I finally now got to go to Edwardsville, it was a coincidence. So I had looked forward to meeting those people I had met who had come from the same university many years ago. So when I met him, it was the introductory dinner they had for new students. And I saw him there, and I was like, I know this person somewhere. And I went to him, and I introduced myself. And I was like, where? I said, Nigeria. And he said, yeah, he was in Nigeria, but he doesn't remember me. So I tried to explain all the things. And he said, oh, he had the album from the event in Nigeria in his house. So would I like to come that evening? So he took me to his house. And then we're looking through the photos, and I saw the photos. And I said, see, this is me, this is you. And he was so excited. Even that evening, he gave me a bicycle, one of the bicycles I rode around the campus. He was such a nice person. And we became very close. He became like a father figure to me while I was there. Being in a new place, sometimes you need support and family support. I mean, I was always on campus. And the relationship I had with many people there was just professional. But for him, he was much more than that. He would come, ask whether we needed anything. During my birthday, he had a party for me in his house. He drove us around most of America. When I went to Abraham Lincoln's burial place in Springfield, he was the one. Not just me, by the way, African students. And he's an African-American person, but he was such a large-hearted man that, it just made all the experience of America for me much pleasant than it would have been. Yes.
Now, how is this poetry, travelogue, and memoir?
Yes, as you can tell, it's a book of poetry. All the things I talk about there, except the preface, were written in poetry. But all the things I talk about there were describing events and things and places and people that I met while in the US. So it's a poetry collection, but it's describing a time and place. And it's a memoir because it's talking about my life. One of the things I struggled with while I was deciding to write the book, so I made the decision to write a book in 2010 when I finished my Fulbright program. I had not even started my master's at the time. I had to go back to Edwardsville to start my master's. But I always thought one day I'm going to write about the experience I had for 1 or 3 years, 1 year at a time, became 3 years, living in this small space, the people I met, how important and memorable the environment was. But while I was in Nigeria, I wasn't quite sure. After a while, do I write a self-help book for people who want to be Fulbright scholars, to learn how to survive in America? Do I write a book about, a black man in America, the typical race book of, the surviving, all of that? Or should I just write a novel and just fictionalize everything? So I couldn't decide for a long time. And then one day I had a memory and I wrote a poem about it. And then I was like, okay, this is nice. Let me think of more memories. And I did. And I started writing even more. And then eventually I have a collection of poetry. So eventually I realized that I had achieved all the things I wanted to achieve without having to agonize too much about what kind of direction I have.
Is there one you would like to read for us?
Read out loud.
To give viewers a teaser.
Yes.
An idea of what we have in here.
Let me read the Campus Deer, the one you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Which was inspired by me encountering deer, the animal deer. We call it etu in Nigeria, or igala, behind my apartment in Edwardsville. And for the first time, as an African who had always been asked by many of my friends, oh, you must see so many lions or tigers in your country. And I've been scandalized by that assumption that animals just roamed around us. Now realizing the fact that they were actually seeing more animals, more bush animals in America around me than I would have at home. So I was like, okay, this is an interesting dynamic I think I need to write about. So this was what inspired me.
Okay.
So I hope you enjoy it.
Interesting.
Campus Deer. No one would believe that the African had not seen them alive, this close, ever, until language brought him there. Certainly not the students who regaled him with third-hand tales that he had heard and believed of the Maasai outrunning a leopard until it collapsed, too tired to move. I'm not Maasai, he should have responded with a frown. Instead, he explained the difference between East and West, rural and urban, Ibadan and Rift Valley, wide open lands and urban zoos, village hunters and city dwellers. At Cougar Village, the difference was never exactly clear, which tickled him. Brown friends on the lawn, the animals ate behind the tennis court on his way to class, and stared at him with little interest. Lagos-Ibadan Expressway on poles, hanging down the hunter's hands like a roadside flag. Their cousins knew an African when they saw one in the bush, singing Ijala to the boom of Dane rifles and waiting cauldrons, pounded yam and fresh palm wine, ready to welcome hunter and game. It was disrespect, he thought, that venison could read, like students, the signs that said, call 911 if you're ever attacked by a deer. Thank you.
Kola, thank you so much. Thank you. It's very exciting and a lot more of that in here. Thank you. It's been nice having you on Channels Book Club.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that. Well, Kola Olatunbosun read from his book to us. So let's sit back and enjoy the reading.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kola Tubosun. I am the author of this collection of poems titled Edwardsville by Heart, which I wrote in 2018 to mark the 3 years I spent in a small town in southern Illinois titled, that's called Edwardsville. So this poem captures the time, the places, the people, and the places I visited while I was there. I'm going to read a few of these poems for you today, and I hope you enjoy listening to them. The first one is titled First Malaria, which I wrote to mark the time I had malaria while in the US and the response that my colleagues and friends had to this strange disease they hadn't heard about before. First malaria. 6 weeks in, I crashed down in sweats and fever with symptoms all too familiar, except to the doctor and students to whom I could only have been dying in installments beyond American care. With me, a few doses of home calmed the room. Fancida, artesunate, paracetamol as Nigerian doctors prescribed. Not enough, though, to calm the campus Red Cross, to whom being Nigerian was enough disqualification, and would say no more. Often, I remember the joke about the student from somewhere speaking British English who answered drugs when asked at the border what he had in his luggage to declare. He did not make his next flight. At Cougar Village, the mosquitoes bore West Nile virus and encephalitis and probed just as hungrily as the school insurance administrators who gave no refunds and no toss except the cold comforts that it won't just be malaria that kills me here. And the last poem is titled Shango at Peck. I wrote this after encountering a bust of Shango, a god that I'm familiar with, a carving of him on the 3rd floor on campus, which was an exhibition space. A Shango jacket on a bust, up at Peck, stares glumly at me when I walk to class on evenings when hunger held my head in syntax blues. Its annotations often weave proud affectations into my gait, in the box where its royal colors glare as display gem for those who cared that it was there. But impotent, it stares at me again through the glass on the day after a tornado threatened to throw me out of the country, head first, without proper goodbyes, on Governor's Parkway. Cold comfort, to admire the grace of a God I know so well, I thought, lying helpless now against its rival sway, Zeus, over its resident town. Thank you very much.
It's an intertwined event in appreciation of art collections at the Orison Gallery, Abuja. Prominent men and women from far and wide are present. The organizer, Senator Olubunmi Adetumbi, emphasizes how works of art have over the years continued to communicate cultural diversity.
This kind of place, it usually, communicates a lot of our diverse culture. So when we have these kind of dignitaries here, it will communicate more, to the expatriate community and to, different indigents, even here in Abuja, that this is the kind of cultural heritage that we have.
Reflecting on extracts from his books Chronicles of the Happiest People on Earth and Triumphalism in Academy, Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka addresses the effect of bastardization of religious practices in Nigeria.
Once Islam is mentioned, once Christianity is mentioned, anything goes. And so there we are today. Butchery, kidnapping, the violation, the traumatization of children in the name of religion. But of course, we granted these religions impunity and immunity. We have people being beheaded, their heads paraded in the streets because they are supposed to have insulted a religious avatar. Once it's religion, a kind of sensitivity comes about, as if religion is not about human beings any longer.
He also pulled no punches in debunking an attempt made by Caroline Davies, a South African author, to link him and other African writers to the CIA. Davies, in her book African Literature and the CIA, claims that during the period of decolonization in Africa, the CIA covertly subsidized a number of African authors, editors, and publishers as part of his anti-communist propaganda strategy. Davies pointed out what she referred to as the success of the CIA in secretly infiltrating and influencing African literary magazines and publishing firms using Wole Soyinka, Nat Nakasa, and Bessie Head, among others, as case studies.
This is a book by a certain woman called Caroline Davies, African Literature and the CIA, subtitled Networks of Authorship and Publishing. Let's read what I wrote when we discovered what had been going on. But I said that nobody pretended, because the evidence was clear. These people have been infiltrating everywhere. This is now me quoting Madame. She says, Juliana Spar alleges that Soyinka had unusually close ties to the U.S. government, even to the point of frequently meeting with U.S. intelligence in the late 1970s. Yep. So that is the reason why I had to send a letter to the U.S. ambassador, because after a long search, we tracked down the source, her source, authority. And this was the work by Juliana Spark, S-P-A-H-R, which claimed that cables, diplomatic cables from an embassy indicated this meeting. But when categorical claims are made and presented as fact, that is where Wahala begins. And this is what this woman, Caroline Davies, a daughter of apartheid, has done. Sweeping a whole generation of African writers under the brush of the CIA, picking facts here, there, and of course, in the leadership position, Coconut Head himself. And I wondered, what on earth is the motivation?
Other participants lent their voices to the need for Nigerian culture to be preserved and shared with other nations.
One of the best things we have that we're not promoting enough is our culture. So having Professor Soyinka take us through some book reading here, having some conversation, and then in this midst of this beautiful collection of work of art here in Nigeria, it's beautiful. You know, why you see this amalgamation is that we must promote who we are. We must promote what we do. And as we heard during that book reading, others should not tell our stories. We are the best persons to tell our stories. So these are things that we should take seriously. You lose your culture, you lose everything.
One other highlight of the event was the signing of Professor Soyinka's books.
It's almost as if the older Professor Wole Soyinka gets, the fresher he is. We wish him many more years of churning out those great literary works. This is where we have to round up the show today. As always, we'll be delighted to get your feedback through any of our social media platforms displayed on your screen. My name is Olakunle Kasumo. Remember, one great book can change your life. Bye-bye.